What's going on, everybody? It is Overreaction Time once again. I'm your host, Simon Samano, and for this UFC 316 pay-per-view edition of ORT, we've got none other than the fabulous Farah Hannoun. Farah, what's good? How you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing awesome. I'm doing great. You excited for this pay-per-view this weekend?
I am actually. Some interesting storylines, so I'm looking forward to it.
Which we are definitely going to cover some of those interesting storylines on this edition of ORT. So you ready to get this thing going?
Yep, let's get the ball rolling.
All right, Kamikaze, you know what time it is. Hit it.
I mean, guys, what are you fucking? Is this tonight's stupid question night? Are you guys that fucking stupid? You can't be that fucking stupid. Who gives a shit? One of the dumbest things I've ever read in my life. Fucking common sense. Everybody knows that.
All right, Farah, UFC 316 going down this Saturday at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. Let's start at the very top of the card with the main event, which is a rematch between Merab Dvalishvili, who is defending his bantamweight title, against Sean O'Malley. This wasn't exactly a fight that I was clamoring for, if I'm being honest, but we kind of knew it was going to go this way if Merab got by Umar back in January. He did get by Umar Nurmagomedov in impressive fashion. Sets up this rematch with O'Malley. I don't know about you, Farah, but this is what I'm feeling right now going into this main event, all right? Here it is. Another loss to Merab Dvalishvili would spell disaster for Sean O'Malley.
Another loss for Merab or Sean?
Another loss to Merab Dvalishvili. Merab would spell disaster for Sean O'Malley.
You know what? Yes, because when you listen to Sean O'Malley speak, obviously being champion means a lot to him. He's made a lot of lifestyle changes. We've seen that in Countdown. We've written a lot of articles about it and stuff. So obviously he understands what comes with being a champion. He's always wanted to be a superstar. He comes out to Lupe Fiasco's song. Like, he understands what comes with being a world champion. So in that regard, yeah. But actually, on the flip side, he's a big enough star to get big fights regardless. This is proof of that, right? Getting this immediate rematch for him. Obviously, Merab went on and defended his belt against Umar. But the fact that after the performance he had at UFC 306, granted, he said he came in with a hip injury that required surgery after. I know all fighters come out in all fighters go into fights injured, but the reality is, I don't know what narrative people are trying to spin about it being somewhat of a close fight. I don't think it was a close fight. I think it was all Merab, minus obviously that moment that Sean O'Malley had in the 5th round. So hard sell, very hard sell for a rematch, because this kind of makes me think of Cody and TJ Dillashaw back when they fought, and Cody got his immediate rematch, and I understood the reasoning behind it because of the star power and what the UFC potentially saw in Cody. But at least Cody, he knocked down TJ in that 1st round. Yeah. TJ rallied to beat him. It was at least a little bit more competitive, left a little bit more question marks. But O'Malley and Merab, the first fight, not so much. So the fight's a hard sell. So the fact that O'Malley got this opportunity, and if he loses, I think in terms of the title picture, you definitely got to put O'Malley on the side for a while. But in terms of O'Malley himself, I think he's a big enough name, and I think the rest of the division acknowledges that he's a big enough name that he could headline plenty of fights, and they could find many ways to include him. Like this BMF title, I mean, it's like, what if Poirier wins and it's retired again? They could introduce in the bantamweight division, right? So there are ways that the UFC can make Sean O'Malley a marquee name, headline events, throw a BMF belt, whatever it is. But in terms of the title picture, absolutely.
Yeah, the thing here's where I'm going with this too, Farah, though. You're right. Title is out of the question. Like, there's no doubt. I don't think there's any doubt. If Sean O'Malley loses this fight, he's going to be in that territory where he's going to have to win 2 or 3 fights in a row in a really tough division to even get back to a title shot. So in that sense, it's a disaster. But I think of it like this as well, Farah. You talk about Sean O'Malley being a star, and I know he is to a star to some degree. But to me, even that stock plummets big time, in my opinion, because I think results are what his career is based on now. To me, Sean O'Malley, the whole Sugar Show gimmick, the whole thing, and the reason why, I think you go back, I think they go back and his team looks at some film, some press conferences. Sean could never really keep up with other people on the mic. He really can't. He's really not that guy. He doesn't have the gift of gab. He may be some weird personality, but then if you strip that away, now he's not smoking weed. He's not that dude, like, I don't know that he's that guy. He needs to be a champion in order to keep his level up here. Otherwise, the stock overall, to me, even as a star, drops considerably.
Yeah,
Yes or no?
okay. I wouldn't say that's an overreaction because, like you said, he was kind of appealing to the younger crowd, like the Nelk
Correct.
boys
Yep.
crowd, like that fandom. So I understand that. And look, he is an exciting fighter when things are going his way. His performances are fun, but obviously when he's on the defensive end and having to fend off grappling and stuff. Because you think back at the Aljamain Sterling fight, it was that moment, that knockout. And I'm not calling it a lucky win by any means. That's what Sean O'Malley does. He's a counter fighter, and he was patient.
I did.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm gonna be fair to him and say it wasn't a lucky one. I'm sure
I said he played right into. I
disagree.
said he played right into his hands. But anyways, go ahead.
Okay, fine. Tim Welsh's fault, right, for calling out the corner instruction. But I'm saying that fight wasn't exactly entertaining, right, up until that point. Nothing really happened, and I believe he even lost the first round. So I understand where you're coming from in that regard, but I just think the state that the UFC is in, they're starving for stars. So I think they could continue to push and promote him and hopefully get him in a marquee spot in some shape or form. Like I told you, I wouldn't even be surprised if the BMF title just somehow moved to the bantamweight division if Poirier wins, or even if Holloway wins and decides to do something else. You never know. So I just think the UFC are going to continue to push and promote Sean O'Malley. They like Sean O'Malley, and the state that the UFC is in right now, they're starving for stars. Alex Pereira just lost. They're looking for somebody that can carry that torch. So yeah, a loss hurts, but I think the UFC is still going to find a way to put Sean O'Malley in big matchups. And bantamweight has enough big names, exciting fighters that they could do that.
It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough to climb back if he loses. But hey, we'll see how it goes with Sean O'Malley. This fight, again, I'm not really looking forward to it. I expect a lot of the same, but you never know. There's always a chance that Sean could have studied up and Merab gets caught or something like that. Otherwise, I don't know. We'll see. I expect that fight to look very similar to what we saw back in September of last year. All right, Farah, let's move on to the co-main event of UFC 316, where we're going to have a women's bantamweight title fight, all right, between champion Julianna Pena. She's going to defend her belt against Kayla Harrison. Now, this has been what Kayla's been talking about for forever, right? She's been hinting at this stuff and talking about it since she was back in the PFL. This is her moment. We're finally here. It's her big title fight, her big UFC title fight. And so, I've talked about this matchup before in the past, and this one may not surprise you, but you tell me if it's an overreaction or not, okay? Kayla Harrison is about to have her way with Julianna Pena.
I mean, the odds suggest it's not an overreaction, right? And considering Kayla's fighting style and how strong she is, the grappling and all of that, and what we saw in Nunes versus Pena, maybe even 1 and 2, actually. Yeah, I'm not going to act like I'd be extremely surprised if Saturday morning I'm sitting there and I'm watching Kayla Harrison just have her way. But look, Julianna is very tough. That's what we know. She doesn't have any quit in her. She'll keep fighting. She's got ground skills herself, whether as a grappler or her submission skills. So she's going to keep fighting regardless. She's banking on the fact that Kayla Harrison is going to slow down. So if she can weather an early storm and drag Kayla into the latter rounds, we know, look, she's never made 135 pounds before in her life. She's talked about it time and time again, how this weight cut is extremely taxing on her body, and she puts her faith in God in making that weight. She's a professional. Yeah. I know that. I don't doubt that she's going to make the weight, but what is that going to do to her body? I mean, look what happened to Macy Barber. Is it weight cut related? We're not 100% sure, but these weight cuts take a toll on you. So that part is always going to be interesting. And after seeing
I will admit it's an X factor. Yes.
Yeah. And after seeing what Julianna did with Amanda the first time, I think that, the first time. After seeing what she did against Amanda the first time, I think that idea is no longer that insane to people. Especially that Kayla doesn't have the resume that Amanda Nunes does, right? Like, she's 2-0 in the UFC. Obviously, people put an asterisk on her competition in the PFL, although obviously Larissa Pacheco is very good and whatnot. But it's not an overreaction to think that Kayla's going to have her way with Julianna. The odds suggest that as well. But at the same time, I think because of what we saw with Pena and Nunes won, it wouldn't be the craziest idea in the world to think that maybe Julianna could drag this fight into the late rounds.
See, Farah, you have a way of bringing me back down from my overreactions. Okay, the 1 extra pound, right? She's made 136. She's never made 135. So the 1 pound, the 1 pound could be significant. It could play a role in this fight. I do agree. But I'm just going to say this. I think aside from she caught lightning in a bottle in that first. Julianna Pena caught lightning in a bottle in that first fight with Amanda Nunes. The second fight looked more like what the first fight should have looked like, and I think you were on the show when we talked about this. She's a fraudulent champion to me at the moment, even because she didn't beat Raquel Pennington. She didn't win that fight. I'm sorry, but she didn't win that fight, in my opinion. So to me, this is the chance where Kayla now comes in, smashes her, and Julianna kind of goes away, probably for good, because she's towards the end of her career.
Look, Julianna, I always said she has this like delusional type of confidence that somehow makes her overachieve in my opinion. No, surely not in her opinion, but that makes her overachieve in a lot of people's opinions. But I'll say this, if Kayla doesn't dominate her, I think Kayla's stock drops, actually. I think Kayla has to go out there. And I know Julianna's the champion, and I know that, her resume, she's fought the better fighters throughout her career, but I think based on the odds, based off of Kayla's fighting style, based off of the things like what John Anik just told Georgian Goes on MMA Junkie Radio, like she could be the face of women's MMA, and she can, the UFC kind of need an American champion perhaps, and I know Sean O'Malley has an opportunity to regain the title, but yeah, I mean, Kayla Harrison has an amazing story, and John talked about how she could be on these different talk shows, like mainstream media outside of MMA and stuff. So yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure on her, and I think a lot of people are expecting her, like yourself, to go out there and dominate Julianna Pena. So I think, if anything, if Kayla doesn't do that, if she just slows down a little, especially that she faced some adversity against Ketlin Vieira, she got, cut for the first time and stuff, like people expect her to dominate. So I think, if anything, there's more pressure on her than Julianna.
Interesting. Okay. I like that. Farah. All right. That is a nice segue, okay, into the third topic I want to cover regarding UFC 316, and that is pressure, okay, because we look at this card top to bottom, all right, and I'm going to go ahead and hit you with this because there's one fighter on here, to me, who's got a lot of it, and I'll say it like this. The UFC 316 fighter facing the most pressure to win is Patchy Mix.
I'm only going to say it's an overreaction because I think that actually Kayla does.
It's Kayla?
I think it's Kayla. Some people will say Sean O'Malley for the obvious reasons, but we talked about how the the first fight went and how some people put question marks around his win over.
I mean, you talked about how he can rebound and still get good fights.
Yeah.
So Kayla, but you think it's Kayla though?
I think because the expectations are so high. She's been a winner her whole life. Like Kayla Harrison knows nothing but winning. Olympic gold medals multiple times, 2-time PFL champion. I know she lost to Pacheco, but people forgot about that because she's already won the PFL tournament twice. This is kind of like everything she's been talking about, is that, people look at the UFC as the best. You can't consider yourself the best unless you become. And then there's that Amanda Nunes fight that could come out of it. So
you don't want to lose that fight. You don't want to lose it for sure. Okay, I got you there. But with Patchy though, I mean, listen,
I agree.
Bellator champion, a guy who, when he was concurrent champions with Sean O'Malley, was claiming to be the best bantamweight in the world. He's coming in. You can't come in to the UFC in your debut and lose to Mario Bautista. I mean, you just can't. You cannot. That would be devastating. You lose, you don't even get to debut afterwards in the rankings. Like, where would Patchy Mix even go from there? What would you do with him? It's pretty clear cut. You beat Mario Bautista, he could be ranked anywhere from 5 to 9 probably, and now he's on a clear title path. If he loses, though, what would he do after that? You can't talk up yourself as being the best bantamweight in the world and then come in your UFC debut and lose to Mario Bautista. To me, that's why he faces the most pressure.
I understand where you're coming from, but I'll still call it an overreaction just because. How old's Patchy? He's young, if I'm not mistaken.
He's in his early 30s. I think he's in his early 30s. Let's see.
No, that'll be older. Yeah, that'll be older.
31. He's 31.
Okay.
He's in his prime. He is in his prime right now.
He's in his prime. No, and look, don't get me wrong. Like, Mario Bautista seems to be everyone's worst enemy at this rate. So it's like he has a lot to gain by beating Mario Bautista, because I think a lot of people want to see Mario lose. But Mario's a very good fighter at the end of the day, and I understand that he has to beat him because it's not, at least Pitbull got Yair Rodriguez, who's a former interim champion, a bigger name than Mario Bautista. So I understand where you're coming from. But Kayla, I think this is her last shot. Like, don't forget that
her last shot.
I mean, the weight cuts kill her. So it's like, imagine going through that weight cut. And we said it, if she loses to Julianna, it's probably going to be her winning the first couple of rounds, then a rally from Julianna. So that's going to take a lot out of you mentally and physically. And it's like you have to go through, would she get an immediate rematch looking at the landscape of 135? Maybe, but
Yeah, probably.
it depends. Depends how the fight goes. But yeah, I'm just saying she has the most pressure, the most to lose, because there's an Amanda Nunes fight there waiting for her. She can go out there and dominate Julianna Pena. We're talking about face of women's MMA. We're talking about an American champion being one of the biggest stars. The UFC is starving for a new star. So all of that to gain for Kayla Harrison after Saturday if she can get the job done.
If she wins and becomes bantamweight champion, I'm just curious. And then that sets up the Amanda Nunes fight. You think that fight happens at bantamweight or featherweight?
If Amanda Nunes is smart, she'd make it a bantamweight. But who knows where Amanda Nunes is at after retirement, right? But where's the significance in making it a featherweight? Are we going to bring back the featherweight title?
You could just bring the, who knows? I don't know. I'm just saying, like, if neither one of them wants to make the cut, they would just do it just because it's a division that exists, you know?
Does it exist?
Or, well, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, but like it exists in the sport. It doesn't exist in the UFC. You know what I'm saying?
Unless Amanda Nunes brings back that title and Kayla gets a chance to be double champ, but why would Amanda do that? Give her the opportunity to take everything. So I think it's got to be at 35.
All right, Farah. Cool. Well, we got a lot to look forward to at UFC 316, and I'm sure we'll talk about UFC 316 coming out of it next week. So let's move on, though. All right, Farah. I want to talk about something we've never talked about before on the show. Just kidding. We're going to talk about Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall. All right. Just kidding. We're going to talk about Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall. Specifically, I'm going to zero in on something from this past week where Jon Jones did an interview with Vic Blends, which was somebody I'd never heard of before, but apparently this guy is a great barber and is an influencer, YouTuber, does these in-depth interviews. Had no idea he interviewed Barack Obama, but that happened. So anyways, Jon Jones had this casual interview with Vic Blends, and I thought there was a question that he asked and an answer that was really interesting and telling. And it went like this, Fada, if you missed it. Vic Blends asked Jon Jones, would you still love fighting the same way if you weren't champ? And this was Jon Jones's response. I'm going to read it, quote unquote here. No, I don't think I could ever be a person who loves fighting as a non-winner. For me, I'm so connected to winning, it's probably not even healthy. I see fighters that take losses and they smile and they hug their wives. Hey, better luck next time. If I were to ever lose, I would be devastated. I would be angry. I'd be upset and depressed. Pretty heavy stuff there from Jon Jones talking about how he would feel if he lost. And that really got me thinking, Fada. And you saw on MMA Junkie, I wrote the column. So I'm just going to give you the headline as my overreaction here. Jon Jones will not fight Tom Aspinall because he's too afraid of losing.
Okay,
it doesn't mean he's afraid. I'm not saying he's afraid of Tom Aspinall, but he said it right there. He is afraid of losing, and I think he recognizes that Tom Aspinall is a legitimate threat. So
what are we doing here? He says the UFC knows what he wants to do.
Which is not fight, apparently. I think he's telling us.
Then what are we doing here? Then why
I don't know what we're doing anymore here. I don't know what we're doing, Vada. I don't know.
Why are we announcing
this dream? Everyone keeps talking about this dream of, it's going to happen at MSG. Maybe MSG, that's the last shot in November. I mean, it doesn't even seem like we're anywhere near that. Dude is living his best life, doing a whole bunch of other stuff. And this, to me, just seals it. He's afraid of losing. And he knows Tom Aspinall can legitimately beat him. Why would you risk, why would Jon Jones, and I get it. I get it now at this point. Why would you risk the final image of yourself in that cage potentially being blitzed and knocked out and finished by Tom Aspinall?
Then why didn't he hang up his gloves after beating Stipe? Why couldn't it have been a double retirement?
This is Jon Jones we're talking about. This is Jon Jones we're talking about. Why does he do anything he does?
True, but what an anticlimactic retirement. If he were done, after all these headlines, after all these narratives, everyone accusing him of being scared and ducking Tom Aspinall, and him apparently saying the UFC knows what he wants and stuff. It's what are we doing here? Are we waiting for MSG to roll out his retirement package to hand the camera on him and say he's in the Hall of Fame? What are we doing here? What are we waiting for?
I don't know, Vada. Gun to my head, though. This fight is not happening. It's not happening.
Then what is all this? What is this What are we dragging out to? To what? That's what
I would think maybe it's some sort of unspoken respect thing. The relationship with the UFC, you want to keep it cordial with them, and Jon doesn't just come out now at this point and announce anything. He says the UFC knows his plans. Let them announce it on their terms. Let them figure it out. I don't know why he doesn't just come out and say he's done and not fighting anymore.
Or are we waiting for Cyril Gane because you just finished filming a movie to get into training camp and announce that as the next fight? Is that what this all is?
Probably. That's probably what it is, right? The UFC wants to make things happen on their terms. Like, everything's got to fit, right? A plan. It's probably something stupid like that. Something anticlimactic. I know it sucks.
Because this
sucks.
Because this is actually the only explanation I can have where Jon Jones is like, okay, I'm not going to say anything because the UFC want to announce the Gane and Aspinall fight, which is going to get everyone to go crazy. Where's that meme? Like, there's this meme video going on of someone who kind of looks like Dana and everyone's like beating him up or something. It's always like circulating when people don't get the announcements they want. And
yeah,
is that what we're going to see? Because that's what the expectation is. I don't know. It's weird. I know Dana keeps saying that he's hopeful. Every time he's asked about it, he said he's confident it's going to happen. And I don't know what.
He's just posturing. He's just posturing. That's a Dana posturing at this point.
I don't know. I just find it hard to believe that after all this wait, that this is what the answer is going to be at the end. It's like, oh, Jon's retiring. This fight's not happening. It's Aspinall versus Gane. Like, I don't know. Like, why? What are we doing here? Like, if Jon knew all along.
We just got a super anticlimactic announcement for International Fight Week. Like, they let that drag on for forever, and the resolution ended up being, oh, okay, Islam did vacate, and now it is a vacant title fight between Ilya and Charles. Like, and there was no big deal about it. Like, it was just like, that's what we settled on.
But that's because we were kind of waiting for the outcome of Bilal and JDM, so there was a little bit of an explanation. What are we doing here outside of maybe waiting for Cyril Gane to get into a proper training camp?
That's it. That's probably it.
Did I just figure it out then?
You might have just solved it.
Maybe. We'll go back to this clip. If I solved it, we're going back to this clip. Okay.
Yeah, we will go back to this clip. But man, I've never been more convinced that this fight is happening. After I read that and I listened to that interview, actually, after I listened to that whole interview, I listened to 90 minutes of Jon Jones. You can't get me to listen to 90 seconds of Jon Jones. I listened to 90 minutes of Jon Jones. I found the interview really fascinating, and I actually would suggest anybody to watch it. It's a pretty fascinating interview overall. Jon did talk about a lot of things, but when
was it recorded though? When was it? That's what I find interesting because we see all these random clips of Jon Jones doing interviews, and I can't even tell when he said what when.
That's true. Yeah, I don't know how old the actual interview is. It came out last Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was midweek last week. It came out, but I've never been more convinced that he's done. I've never been more convinced. I don't know. Hope I'm wrong.
I want to say slight overreaction. Before I used to be like overreaction. Now it's like overreaction. Unless my theory is right, and then we're just going to go back to this clip. But that's the only theory I can come up with. That's it. It's all on Cyril Gane finishing his Netflix movie, which I haven't watched yet, but I'll watch it.
Yeah. All right, Farah. All right, let's move on. We got one last thing I want to talk about on this edition of show. This is actually something we would have talked about last week had we recorded, but we did not do a show last week. So we're going to talk about this week, a little delayed. This is something that's related to Dana White now, okay? Dana White was in one of those, TMZ style interview clips on TikTok from a TikToker. His name was Adam Glynn. Caught him, looked like he was maybe outside of an airport. Something, like I said, it was TMZ style. And he went on to ask him about like stars and stardom. It's funny, you kind of touched on some of this stuff earlier, and we're going to get into it now. But he kind of asked him about stars and stardom and stuff like that. And it was based off of asking about Conor McGregor. And he had mentioned, Dana White did, that there'll never be another Conor McGregor. And he had mentioned that there'll never be another Ronda Rousey. There'll never be another Chuck Liddell. There'll never be another GSP. He said all these things. And he said somebody will pop up very casually. And then Adam Glynn asked the question. He goes, how do you make those guys? I gotta read you the quote so you can hear what Dana White said in response to that. How do you make those guys? Here's what Dana had to say. He said, quote, they make themselves 100%. We find people who have talent. And obviously, if you have the personality that all those other people have that we were just talking about, that's incredible. But I'm always just looking for the best fighters in the world. And, the rest is up to them. The rest is up to them, Farah. There's a fight promoter saying the rest is up to them. So, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you this. The UFC will never have another true superstar as long as Dana White is around.
I don't know.
Nobody will ever reach the Conor or Ronda plateau, that form of stardom. Nobody will reach that again because Dana White is not interested in making any actual true superstars at that level.
Yeah,
Which is interesting because you talked about them starving. So go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah, no, well, look, I'm going to disagree slightly because I will say we do see certain people get fast-tracked more than others. That's a fact. Like, we see the winning streaks that the Bilal Muhammad's had to go on, the Magomed Ankalaevs, the Benil Dariush, who never even ended up getting his title fight. We see those guys having to go for a longer road versus Sean O'Malley, who's now getting an immediate rematch. You can't tell me that the UFC does not try a little bit. I mean, in certain situations, you can argue with the bantamweight title fight that maybe there wasn't a clear-cut contender because Sandhagen had that loss to Umar prior, and then he rebounded, and then you had Petr Yan who fought Merab before, but then again, obviously you would have made a bigger case for him to rematch. Merab over Sean O'Malley, but you can't say that the UFC doesn't try. Like Alex Pereira, if he does end up getting the immediate rematch with Ankalaev, you can't tell me that this isn't what they're trying to do, right? I mean, if this was a show must go on, then Ulberg would probably have his title fight by now. You know what I mean? So it's like they do try. The UFC do try to play specific.
A little bit. I like your qualifier. A little bit.
Yeah,
it really is a little bit. It's like in the most basic sense of like, yeah, we got to make fights with champions, and yeah, we kind of like this guy. But are they really doing the big promotional push behind these fighters the way they used to? The way they used to with Ronda
no.
and,
I mean,
and
yeah.
Conor?
No, because obviously we're not getting a world tour of press conferences and whatnot. I did like the face-to-face or whatever with Kayla and Julianna. I'm like, where's that? Like, we need more of that type of content, and that did good views for ESPN. So it's like they do need more of that type of stuff. And I do realize they haven't been doing it as much. It's been kind of traditional one-on-one interviews, like and stuff. So yeah, I agree. I think there's more that can be done promotionally. And I know a lot of people talk about Dana going to boxing and being distracted by all that, but I don't know.
He's distracted by a lot of things, Farah. I mean, boxing, power slap. Yeah, power slap showing up on the UFC website now, integrated with UFC fighters. You see that? Integrated with UFC fighters. We're not going to, discern the difference between a power slapper and a UFC fighter. Are you kidding me? You have to have the Hawaiian, whoever the hell jabroni, right next to, an actual UFC fighter. I mean, come on, like, what are we doing here? Dana is distracted. Like, he is distracted. He said it right there, Farah. I'm just looking for the best fighters in the world, and the rest is up to them. No, I mean, isn't it on the promoter to promote the fighters?
I will say I don't like that I'm not that I like this part, but I don't like how the UFC have dropped the double champ thing because that was part of the promotional thing, right? Islam Makhachev putting 2 titles on his shoulder. Ilya wanted to do that too, but now all of a sudden they're having to.
It's a prime example. They are not going to go down that road anymore, right? They have put a clear stop to that. Because they know what that can do to a fighter's ego if they achieve, and how difficult that fighter can become if they achieve that status. Obviously, right? They've been there before with Conor McGregor. They've been there before, and they don't want to get back there ever again. I don't think. You know what? Go ahead. You were going to say something.
Yeah, or have like when Henry Cejudo retired and then decided to come back 3 years later, probably because it was a negotiation tactic that went wrong. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. Maybe the last time somebody had a chance to actually do this was Adesanya when he went up to light heavyweight. Right. Who knows what would have happened? That could have been life-changing and really a huge deal for Adesanya had he won against Jan Blachowicz, but he lost. He lost that fight, so we never got to see him as champ. But I feel like had that happened, that would have been like a turning point in his career, especially with his stardom, right? He's kind of like the last guy that I can see who had the charisma, the look, the fighting style, right? Like, he was almost there, but he didn't get there. I just feel like the UFC now, they put a hard stop to the champ status because they know what that can do to a fighter's ego and how difficult they can become. I just think it's a sign of they don't want to push a true superstar.
I mean, I guess like now, yeah. I mean, I can see where you're coming from in that regard. I mean, obviously, we don't even know what's happening with Jon Jones, right? Is it he's been done this whole time? Is it he's asking for too much? We no longer know. But at the end of the day, the last of the dying breed of superstars, the Conor McGregors, the Jon Jones, they're not fighting, and we keep talking about them. Their names are continuously in the headlines. But they're not fighting at the end of the day. And we know that those are the guys, like if Jon Jones does finally decide to fight Tom Aspinall, that's when they'll get the pay-per-view numbers that they haven't gotten in a very long time. Obviously, if Conor McGregor fights, it's going to be the pay-per-view numbers that they haven't gotten in a very long time. So it's, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I see where you're coming from.
The guy coming up who could test this.
Yeah.
It's my boy, Patty Pimblett. My boy, Patty Pimblett.
Yeah,
He's the one who could test this, right?
Yeah.
That's my ride or die in 2025. Once he becomes UFC lightweight champion, we'll see what that might do to that guy's head. But, you know, what'll happen when he becomes UFC lightweight champion.
Ilya versus Patty. That's the biggest.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, don't even get me started.
That's why.
But anyways, yeah,
that's
I don't
why
know.
if Ilya wins, forget booking Patty against anyone. Just throw him against Ilya right away.
No, but you know, again, hearing Dana White say that, just to circle it back, it made me sad. I just think back to the glory days when we did have all these big stars, when we did have Chuck, the guys that he mentioned, GSP, you know, Connor in his heyday, Ronda. I mean, those were great. Brock Lesnar at that time, right? These were true, legit superstars, right? They were mainstream. They were making appearances. They were doing all this stuff. I just feel like we're never going to get to that status ever again. There's too much quantity. They want to pump fights after fight after fight every week. There's no time to develop a superstar anymore, Fada. It's just not in the formula anymore.
What about the new broadcast deal, wherever the UFC ends up? Do you think that could change things? I mean,
I don't think so, because it won't. Even if it's split, they're not going to stop the quantity. Like if they give the fight nights to Netflix, but the pay-per-view stay with ESPN or vice for whatever it is. Honestly, the quantity won't end. We're still going to have week-to-week fights. We're still going to have 45 UFC events a year. And it's just not enough time to build stars. We're moving on to the next week right away, and which means we're moving on to the next fighters. We don't have 2-3 weeks or a month in between anymore fights, where now you're talking about the fighter who was just coming off the big win, right? That's how you build an actual star. The UFC's business model right now is quantity over quality, and unfortunately it means a lack of stars. So
fair enough. There's still a little hope in certain people. I'm still
there is
putting the hope in Ilya and in Patty Pena. Khamzat Chimaev just needs to be more consistent, more active, but there's still a little bit of faith.
Yeah. All right, Farah. Well, the time for overreacting has come to an end. Thank you so much for being on the show.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's always fun when you're on the show. And so I appreciate you very much. And also, I appreciate everybody for watching. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we will see you on the next edition of ORT. Dana, take us away.
MMA Junkie AI.